Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, my obeisances to you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, welcome you all to the virtual Kartik Katha series. Today we are very fortunate to have the merciful association of His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj. So let me give you a small introduction of Giriraj Swami Maharaj till other participants join in. Giriraj Swami was born Glenn Philip Tetton, the only son of a respected Chicago lawyer who was later appointed judge. In March of 1969, while studying at Brandeis University in Boston, he met His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of International Society for Krishna Consciousness, ISKCON, from whom he felt he learned more in one brief exchange than he had learned in his many years of academic education. After graduating from Brandeis, he accepted formal initiation from Srila Prabhupada and received the name Giriraj Das. Giriraj quickly became a leading member of the Boston Center, and he was soon given the opportunity to go to India with Srila Prabhupada and helped establish Srila Prabhupada's mission over there. In 1972, Giriraj Swami was appointed by Prabhupada to be the president of ISKCON Bombay and trustee of the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. Since then, he has made many significant contributions to Srila Prabhupada's mission, most notably overseeing all aspects of development of Hare Krishna land in Juhu, Bombay. He was instrumental in the acquisition and development of the Bhaktivedanta Ashram in Govardhan and led the development of Kirtan Ashram for women, the Bhaktivedanta Hospice, and the Vrindavan Institute of Palliative Care, all in Vrindavan. Through his efforts, Giriraj Swami has become renowned for the austerities he has accepted, his loyalty and dedication to Srila Prabhupada's mission, his ability to raise funds and cultivate important members of the society, and his care for devotees around the world. In the year following Srila Prabhupada's departure in 1977, Giriraj Swami was awarded the Renounced Order of Life and appointed president of ISKCON's Board of Trustees in India. In 1982, he was appointed to ISKCON's GBC and he went on to oversee the society's activities in Bombay, Mauritius, South Africa, Spain, Portugal, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. Giriraj Maharaj has also taught at the Vrindavan Institute for Higher Education and gives presentation at Japa retreats and workshops around the world. Presently based in Carpinteria, California, Giriraj Swami is focusing on one of the main personal instructions he received from Srila Prabhupada to write. He is the author of Watering the Seed and Many Moons and is working on several publications, including Life's Final Exam. Today, we are very fortunate on this auspicious Rama Ekadashi. Giriraj Maharaj is going to speak on Srila Prabhupada's concluding words of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Prabhupada finished his translation and commentary of Chaitanya Charitamrita on this day in Juhu, Bombay. And Giriraj Maharaj was present there, and Maharaj would tell us about his experiences and enlighten us on this wonderful scripture, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. Thank you, Maharaj. Now I hand over the hosting rights to you. Hare Krishna. Just a small announcement. This is being live streamed on ISKCON New York TV channel in YouTube. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes, I would request the devotees who are on Zoom to put on their cameras as far as possible so we can see their moon-like faces. So I will begin by singing the Mangalacharna prayers and leading a short kirtan, and then we will speak about Srila Prabhupada. Deham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamsa Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Tam Sam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Cha Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine
Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina.
Sorry, Maharaj, can you unmute yourself?
Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namaste Saraswati Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Gurudeva, Jaya Gurudeva, Gurudeva, Srila Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Pariprajakacharya Stotra Sutta Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Pariprajakacharya Stotra Sutta Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. So we welcome you all on this most auspicious occasion of Sri Rama Ekadasi, which has special significance for us, followers of Srila Prabhupada, because on this date, in 1974, Srila Prabhupada completed his translation of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in Juhu, Bombay. My usual practice when Srila Prabhupada was in Bombay was to go to his quarters at the back of Hare Krishna land to accompany him on his morning walk on Juhu Beach. So And Srila Prabhupada's quarters at the back, on the one side were his quarters, and on the other side, just adjoining, were his staff's quarters. So, as usual, I climbed up the stairs. But this time, quite unusually, both the doors were locked. The door to Srila Prabhupada's quarters and the door to his staff's quarters. So I knocked on both doors and no one answered. I knocked again. And eventually, Srila Prabhupada's secretary at the time, Harikesh Prabhu, opened the door to the staff's quarters. And he said that Srila Prabhupada had been up all night translating Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, that he had completed his translation, and that at the end he had dictated the most beautiful glorification of his spiritual master. And Harikesh Prabhu added that Srila Prabhupada was in a very jubilant mood, and he said that we should celebrate by having a feast. Now, you know, in the Vedic calendar, Vaishnava calendar, the new day begins with sunrise. So, although Srila Prabhupada completed the translation before sunrise on the Rama Ekadasi, when we went upstairs, which was, would have been the Devadasi, R.K. said we should have a feast. Now, I will read from Srila Prabhupada's concluding words. Today, Sunday, November 10th, 1974, corresponding to the 10th of Kartik, Chaitanya era 488, the 11th day of the dark fortnight, the Rama Ekadasi, we have now finished the English translation of Sri Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami's Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita in accordance with the authorized order of His Divine Grace, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj, my beloved eternal spiritual master, guide, and friend. Although according to material vision, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada, passed away from this world on the last day of December 1936, I still consider His Divine Grace to be always present with me by His Vani, His words. And here Srila Prabhupada is setting the theme for the entire concluding words, which is His spiritual master's presence. There are two ways of association, by Vani and by Vapu. Vani means words, and Vapu means physical presence. Physical presence is sometimes appreciable and sometimes not. But Vani continues to exist eternally. Therefore, we must take advantage of the Vani, not the physical presence. The Bhagavad Gita, for example, is the Vani of Lord Krishna. Although Krishna was personally present 5,000 years ago and is no longer physically present from the materialistic point of view, the Bhagavad Gita continues. In this connection, we may call to memory the time when I was fortunate enough to meet His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, sometime in the year 1922. Srila Prabhupada had come to Calcutta from Sridham Mayapur to start the missionary activities of the Gaudiya Math. He was sitting in a house at Altadanga when, through the inducement of an intimate friend, the late Sriman Narendranath Balak, I had the opportunity to meet His Divine Grace for the first time. So Srila Prabhupada was the leader of his friends. And his friend, Narendranath Malik, a dear friend, wanted Srila Prabhupada, who at the time was called Abai, he wanted Abai to meet Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to approve of him or disapprove of him. So they wanted Srila Prabhupada's verdict about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So he was sitting in a house at Ultadanga when, through the inducement of an intimate friend, the late Sriman Narendranath Malik, I had the opportunity to meet His Divine Grace for the first time. I do not remember the actual date of the meeting, but at that time I was one of the managers of Dr. Bose's laboratory in Calcutta. I was a newly married young man, addicted to Gandhi's movement, and dressed in khadi. Fortunately, even at our first meeting, His Divine Grace advised me to preach the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in English in the Western countries. Because at that time I was a complete nationalist, a follower of Mahatma Gandhi's, I submitted to His Divine Grace that unless our country were freed from foreign subjugation, no one would hear the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu seriously. Of course, we had some argument on this subject, but at last I was defeated and convinced that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message is the only panacea for suffering humanity. Panacea means the cure for everything. And Srila Prabhupada relates that up until that point, he had never been defeated in an argument. But here he was defeated by his Guru Maharaj, and as Srila Prabhupada commented, he was happy that he was defeated. Of course, we had some argument on this subject, but at last I was defeated and convinced that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's message is the only panacea for suffering humanity. I was also convinced that the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was then in the hands of a very expert devotee, and that surely the message of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would spread all over the world. I could not, however, immediately take up his instructions to preach, but I took his words very seriously and was always thinking of how to execute his order, although I was quite unfit to do so. So here Srila Prabhupada enunciates a very important principle of devotional service, which is that if we receive an instruction from the spiritual master, but are due to circumstances unable to execute the order, we should keep the instructions within our heart and always think of when we can get the opportunity to execute the order. I had my own experience with that principle with Srila Prabhupada. In India, Srila Prabhupada had instructed me to write. He said that I should take up writing as my first business. So in those days, we didn't have computers, and in India, even typewriters were very rare. So I bought some pens and paper to follow Srila Prabhupada's instruction that I should write. But soon thereafter, we received a telegram saying that we should come to Bombay because Srila Prabhupada was organizing the first big Bombay Pandal program. So I went to Bombay, and Shamsundar Prabhu was the temple president. And so he wanted me to collect ads to be published in a souvenir magazine to be released on the occasion of the Pandal to raise funds. So I told him that Srila Prabhupada had instructed me to write. And Shamsundar Prabhu replied that you can do that anytime, but this is one opportunity we have. We can walk into any businessman's office and ask him to give an advertisement for our souvenir. And it will be very easy for them to give from their businesses. The advertisement would be taken as a tax deduction. So I should collect for the Pandal program, and then I could take up writing. So what he said made sense, and Srila Prabhupada wanted us to cooperate with our authorities. So I agreed. Then, a little before the Pandal program was scheduled to begin, Srila Prabhupada arrived in Bombay. At that time, we were staying in the Akash Ganga building on Warden Road. Our apartment was overlooking the ocean. And as usual, when Srila Prabhupada arrived, he went into his room and all the devotees followed, and he glanced lovingly at all of the disciples and, reciprocated with them in little ways. And then he asked me, "So, Giriraj, how is your writing going?" I was flustered. I didn't know what to say. And Srila Prabhupada appreciated my mental condition. So he said, "All right, we will discuss later." So shortly thereafter, after all the devotees had left the room, Srila Prabhupada called me back. And again, he asked, "So what about your writing?" And I told him what Shamsundar Prabhu had said, that, this is one opportunity we have to walk into any man's office and ask for an advertisement. And I added that I knew that Srila Prabhupada wanted us to cooperate with our authorities. And so that's what I had done. But still, I was nervous. I was anxious. I didn't know what Srila Prabhupada would think of my answer. And Srila Prabhupada replied, yes, you can suspend the order of the spiritual master, but you can never neglect it. And he said, just like me, my spiritual master instructed me to write, but I've been so busy traveling and preaching in India that I also have hardly had any time to write. But when the circumstances allow, then I will take up the writing. And so similarly with you. I was very relieved how understanding and practical Srila Prabhupada was. So, so now we come back to the concluding words. Srila Prabhupada says, I could not, however, immediately take up his instructions to preach, but I took his words very seriously and was always thinking of how to execute his order, although I was quite unfit to do so. In this way, I passed my life as a householder until 1950, when I retired from family life as a vanaprastha. With no companion, I loitered here and there until 1958, when I took sannyas. Then I was completely ready to discharge the order of my spiritual master. Previously, in 1936, just before His Divine Grace passed away at Jagannath Puri, I wrote him a letter asking what I could do to serve him. In reply, he wrote me a letter dated 13th December 1936, ordering me in the same way to preach in English the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as I had heard it from him. After he passed away, I started the fortnightly magazine Back to Godhead sometime in 1944 and tried to spread the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through the magazine. After I took sannyas, a well-wishing friend suggested that I write books instead of magazines. Magazines, he said, might be thrown away, but books remain perpetually. Now, here's another important point, that Srila Prabhupada was ready to accept suggestions from well-wishing friends, as long as the suggestions were in keeping with the instructions of his spiritual master. And there was a similar instance in Bombay. Srila Prabhupada had a well-wishing friend named Bridratan Mohta. He was a life member and supporter. And Mr. Mohta had suggested that Srila Prabhupada serialize the Bhagavad Gita in Back to Godhead magazine. And Srila Prabhupada accepted the suggestion, although he adjusted it and made it Srimad Bhagavatam that was serialized in Back to Godhead rather than the Bhagavad Gita. So we should be prepared to accept a good advice from well-wishing friends, which advice furthers our service to our spiritual master. After he passed away, I started the fortnightly magazine Back to Godhead sometime in 1944 and tried to spread the cult of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through this magazine. After I took sannyas, a well-wishing friend suggested that I write books instead of magazines. Magazines, he said, might be thrown away, but books remain perpetually. Then I attempted to write Srimad Bhagavatam. Before that, when I was a householder, I had written on Srimad Bhagavad Gita and had completed about 1,100 pages, but somehow or other the manuscript was stolen. So that's a lot to have 1,100 pages of work stolen. But Srila Prabhupada persevered in his service to his spiritual master and in his mission to save the fallen conditioned souls. I had written on Srimad Bhagavad Gita and had completed about 1,100 pages, but somehow or other the manuscript was stolen. In any case, when I had published Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, in 3 volumes in India, I thought of going to the USA. By the mercy of His divine grace, I was able to come to New York on September 17th, 1965. Since then, I have translated many books, including Srimad Bhagavatam, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, a summary, and many others. In the meantime, I was induced to translate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and publish it in an elaborate version. In his leisure time in later life, His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would simply read Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. It was his favorite book. He used to say that there would be a time when foreigners would learn the Bengali language to read the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The work on this translation began about 18 months ago. Now, by the grace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, it is finished. In this connection, I have to thank my American disciples, especially Sriman Pradumya Das Adhikari, Sriman Nitai Das Adhikari, Sriman Jayadvaita Das Brahmachari, and many other boys and girls who are sincerely helping me in writing, editing, and publishing all these literatures. So Srila Prabhupada has been giving the credit to his Guru Maharaj, you could say passing the credit upwards. And now he's giving credit to his disciples who were helping him. And you could say passing the credit down to them. But he's not taking the credit for himself at any stage. Now, in the next paragraph, Srila Prabhupada makes a very revolutionary statement, or very illuminating statement. I think that His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, is always seeing my activities and guiding me within my heart by His words. As it is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adhikavaye, Bhagavatam 1:1:1. So that we can all understand that we receive an instruction from the spiritual master, and that instruction is in our heart and it inspires us. But here Srila Prabhupada says something more. Spiritual inspiration comes from within the heart, wherein the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in His Paramatma feature, is always sitting with all His devotees and associates. So yes, Srila Prabhupada got inspiration from the super soul within the heart, but the super soul within the heart is not alone. He's accompanied by all his devotees, including, in this case, we can say Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So in a very personal way, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was guiding Srila Prabhupada in his work of translation from within the heart, where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was sitting along with the Paramatma. It is to be admitted that whatever translation work I have done is through the inspiration of my spiritual master. Because personally, I am most insignificant and incompetent to do this materially impossible work. I do not think myself a very learned scholar, but I have full faith in the service of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If there is any credit to my activities of translating, it is all due to His Divine Grace. And it is said that when the spiritual master gives order, he gives the potency to execute the order. So here Srila Prabhupada is saying, I do not think myself a very learned scholar, but I have full faith in the service of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If there is any credit to my activities of translating, it is all due to His Divine Grace. Certainly, if His Divine Grace were physically present at this time, I don't know what that ringing is, but anyway. Certainly, if His Divine Grace were physically present at this time, it would have been a great occasion for jubilation. But even though He is not physically present, I am confident that He is very much pleased by this work of translation. So, yeah, even though He's not physically present, He's spiritually present. And He's pleased. Srila Prabhupada is confident that He's pleased by this work of translation. And I have no doubt that His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, was immensely pleased with Srila Prabhupada for his translation and for everything else Srila Prabhupada did in his service. He was very fond of seeing many books published to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Therefore, our society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, has been formed to execute the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So basically, Srila Prabhupada is saying that ISKCON is meant to execute the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in the matter of publishing and distributing books to spread Krishna consciousness. It is my wish that devotees of Lord Chaitanya all over the world enjoy this translation. In other words, Srila Prabhupada wanted us to read his books. As he once said of his disciples, distributing my books will keep them happy, but reading my books will keep them, meaning keep them in Krishna consciousness. And yes, we should make all the efforts that Srila Prabhupada put into writing his books fruitful by ourselves reading the books, studying the books, and applying what we read in our lives. It is my wish that devotees of Lord Chaitanya all over the world enjoy this translation. And I'm glad to express my gratitude to the learned men in the Western countries who are so pleased with my work that they are ordering in advance all my books that will be published in the future. Yes, Srila Prabhupada had disciples who went to universities and got standing orders for Srila Prabhupada's books. In other words, orders not only for the books that were published, but for the books that would be published in the future. And His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami Maharaj was a leader in that effort. On this occasion, therefore, I request my disciples who are determined to help me. And here I may say that we all count as Srila Prabhupada's disciples. Some may be Diksha disciples, but certainly we are all Shiksha disciples. On this occasion, therefore, I request my disciples who are determined to help me in this work to continue their cooperation fully, so that philosophers, scholars, religionists, and people in general all over the world will benefit by reading our transcendental literatures, such as Srimad Bhagavatam and Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this is how we can please Srila Prabhupada, one of the important ways by which we can please Srila Prabhupada. And then he concludes, thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, dated November 10th, 1974, at the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, Hare Krishna Land, Juhu, Bombay. Jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai. Sri Rama Ekadasi ki jai. So now, if there's time, I would be open to hearing comments or questions from the devotees who have gathered here on this auspicious occasion.
Thank you, Maharaj, for this wonderful class. Hare Krishna.
Hare
So
Krishna.
if you have any questions, either type it in the chat or raise your hand. I'll unmute you and you can ask Maharaj your question directly. Keep your video on in that case.
Well, I prefer everyone to have their videos on anyway.
Thank you, Maharaj.
But Siddhi Lalasa raised her hand. Please unmute yourself. Or can you unmute her? She doesn't seem to know how to unmute her. Oh, there she is. There she is.
Yes.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I just remembered one nice incident when we were doing the Hare Krishna, the ISKCON World Review, and it's a comment. It's when we're collecting advertisement for the ISKCON World Review, and
When and where was this?
Mauritius, when
Yeah, just I know it was Mauritius, but just so the others can get a sense of the context.
and you increase the rate of the advertisement. It was a very small rate, and you increase like really a lot. And I thought I can't collect this, but you just sent me out to collect the advertisement, and people gave. So that was like following the instruction. Like by myself, I thought no way I can't collect this much. It was like from a small amount to like 1,000 rupees, which was a lot. But you sent me out, and it was like it's instruction, and I have to do it, and took courage and approached people, and they gave. So that was a very nice memory for me.
So this is on the point that when the spiritual master gives an instruction, he gives the potency to execute it.
Yes.
Well, that was certainly true when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur instructed Srila Prabhupada to write. And I suppose the same principle continues through Parampara. Any other questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for your class and thank you for reading. I just want to say thank you for highlighting this sentence. I'm still digesting it. That spiritual inspiration comes from within the heart, wherein the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his Paramatma feature is always sitting with all his devotees and associates. I think previously I've been envisioning more Paramatma in the heart and not Paramatma and all the associates. It makes sense on some level. And I just was wondering if you would elaborate a little bit more on that, because I think it's a pretty profound statement.
Yes. Well, I often, feel that Srila Prabhupada is in my heart, giving me guidance and inspiration. But I thought of it in a more figurative sense. Like, yes, Srila Prabhupada said, if you think of someone, they're in your heart. Mm-hmm. But this makes it more literal, which is fine with me. I'm happy to have them all in my heart. I just pray that I can, be pure enough to access their guidance and direction and inspiration. But I think that's good news.
Yeah, I found it very encouraging.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for that.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I would want to ask a question if you so desire.
Yes.
Maharaj, when Guru Maharaj is not physically present on this planet, the instruction that he has given, or if I'm not so confident that the instruction, whether that was an instruction or a comment, and how to know that it's not coming from my mind and senses, but the direction that I'm getting is from my spiritual master and feeling his potency, not out of a mental platform.
Are you referring to an instruction that he gave you in person or in writing?
Yes.
And then, so
So when I feel to execute it, how do I know whether I am actually following the instruction or is something coming out of my mind and senses
oh,
while executing the instruction at every step?
I see. In other words, you feel that you might not be following the instruction as he would want,
Yes, Maharaj.
that you might be following it according to some mental whimsy. How do you know? And this is when the spiritual master is no longer available. I would suggest two things. One, pray very sincerely to the spiritual master and Srila Prabhupada to guide you. Uh, say you're helpless and completely dependent on their mercy. That was Srila Prabhupada's mood. I mean, he used the word insignificant in his concluding words here, referring to himself. And he used the same word, insignificant, in the poem that he wrote when he arrived in America, signed, the most insignificant beggar. So first of all, we are insignificant, although we do get puffed up with false ego, but we actually are insignificant. And our service is very much facilitated when we realize how insignificant we are and how dependent we are on mercy from our superiors. So that would be the one thing, to pray. And then the other thing would be to consult, senior devotees, experienced devotees, especially those who know your spiritual master's mood and methods, because that's also a very important element in devotional service to consult, and not, just assume that what we're doing is fine as it is, and just carry on in our own way. So, and Srila Prabhupada said that when a group of well-wishing Vaishnavas come to a consensus about us, we should take it as Krishna speaking through them. So that's also an important principle. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Any other questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Hare Prasad.
My
Prabhu.
most humble obeisances to you, all glories to you, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. I was wondering if you could shed light on how we can become tolerant and patient while we're waiting to be able to fulfill the spiritual master's instructions.
There are two things, patience and enthusiasm. And Srila Prabhupada said that that enthusiasm without patience can lead to a desire to control. And patience without enthusiasm can lead to lethargy. So we really need to have both. And again, prayer is a very important element. That we're praying for the opportunity to execute the order and patiently waiting for that opportunity. There could be different reasons, different types of circumstances that are preventing us. Some could be related to our other service and commitments, and some could be related to circumstances. And we just have to pray for the opportunity to execute that order. I mean, devotional service is a privilege, and receiving a direct instruction from the spiritual master is a blessing. So if we're fortunate enough to receive such direct instruction, we should, look for every opportunity to execute it. Once, fairly recently, I met Srila Prabhupada's disciple, Rameshwar Prabhu, who was a very prominent figure in the BBT and in book distribution. And at the Rath Yatra, we were just sitting down on the grass and talking. And he said, Maharaj, you and I are very fortunate because we have received direct instructions from Srila Prabhupada what he wants us to do. So there can be no ambiguity in our minds. But not every disciple had that good fortune of receiving a direct instruction. So I took that to heart, what he said. And so we're so fortunate to have a direct instruction, and we should certainly give our best to execute it. Nice to see you.
Such an honor. Thank you, Maharaj. I'm so happy. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Maharaj, we have two more questions.
Okay.
Prema Manjari Mataji, you can go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Guru Maharaj, you just said what I wanted to ask you the same question, that what about for those who don't receive any direct instruction from the spiritual master? So how do we get the direction of where we want to serve? I mean, we just follow our heart, whatever inspirations we get from the heart, from the Chaitya Guru, which is non-different from the spiritual master. But still, if we don't have that good fortune of having any direct instruction, so is it just fine if we just follow whatever inspires us from the heart?
Well, there are general instructions. Chant minimum 16 rounds, follow the 4 regulative principles, study Srila Prabhupada's books, and in general to taste Krishna consciousness and distribute Krishna consciousness. And, some of Prabhupada's disciples didn't have that much personal association with him, but they really tuned into his heart and have done wonderful service. So, yeah, I think similar to my other answer, pray and consult. Consult devotees who could guide you as to what would be your best service, or how to do your service in the best way. But you're not asking for yourself, you're asking for others, I assume. Prema Mandri, did you want to respond to that comment?
No, in general, I'm asking for myself also, Guru Maharaj, because I just do the needful. Whatever I know, I just do the needful, but I don't have a specific direction where I should utilize my services, energies.
No, I think you're doing well. You're making, I mean, your whole family are devotees, and you've brought many other people into Krishna consciousness and encourage them in Krishna consciousness. You cook well, and that's very important. We have a devotee in our community here named Kandarpa Manjari. And Kandarpa Manjari was instructed by His Holiness Bhakti Churu Swami to stay with a family of Maharaja's disciples in Calcutta who were expert cooks. And he told her that she should learn how to cook from them, because cooking nicely is a very good way to please Vaishnavas. And that's our process to please Vaishnavas. So you are able to do that with your cooking. Yeah, I mean, I think you're doing all right. I think you're doing well.
It's by your mercy, Guru Maharaj. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Sita Thakurani Mataji, you can go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Guru Maharaj, in spite of practicing Krishna consciousness in my best possible way and in my best capacity, I still don't feel the presence of my Guru Maharaj all the time. What shall I do to improve so that I can feel his presence all the time?
Why do you want to feel his presence all the time?
Because how you feel presence of Srila Prabhupada all the time. Srila Prabhupada felt the presence of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur all the time. So I know it will be nice that if I'm guided by you all the time.
But
I
then,
know I'm guided, but I don't feel the presence.
yeah. Well, many times when I would pray for an answer to a question, pray before the deities, which includes the pictures on the altar also. And I wasn't getting an answer. I would ask myself, am I really ready to execute any instruction they give me? Maybe they're not giving me an instruction because they know I won't follow it. So I would have to look into myself, how surrendered am I actually? Am I really ready to follow whatever they say? So I think that's a question that we have to ask ourselves. but certainly to the degree that we're ready to execute any order they give us, they will give us instructions. But if we're afraid, well, what if he asks this? Then what am I going to do? Well, maybe I shouldn't ask what he wants. It could be dangerous for me. So, or it's like, they have these different promotions, and then at the end of the promotion, they often have a little sort of disclaimer, conditions apply, conditions may apply. So it's like that, I'm fully surrendered to you. I'm ready to do whatever you want. Conditions may apply. Hare Krishna. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, if there are no more questions, we can end. And I suggest, so ISKCON New York City.
Yes, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
So are we about ready to conclude?
Yes, Maharaj.
Conclude.
So,
Yeah,
Hare Krishna, just a small announcement.
sure.
So we have Jayadvaita Maharaj joining us on Diwali, Bhakti Prabhav Swami on Govardhan Puja. Next week we have Loknath Swami Maharaj and Devamrit Swami Maharaj in the Kartik Katha series. So please stay tuned, the congregation of ISKCON New York City. And all our lectures will be live streamed on ISKCON New York TV channel. I'm very sorry, today there was some issue with the internet connection, so we lost first few minutes, but it's recorded and I'll upload it later. So thank you, Giriraj Maharaj, so much for this wonderful lecture,
Yeah,
and
inviting
we
me.
hope to have you in the future too.
Sure.
Thank you, Maharaj.
So if we are concluding, now I suggest we end with Vaishnav Pranam.
Yes, Maharaj.
Let us offer our respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnav devotees of the Lord, who are just like desire trees, who can fulfill the desires of everyone, and are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpa trubhyascha kripa sindhuvevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Radha Govinda ki jai.
Giriraj Swami Maharaj ki jai.
Thank you, Maharaj, once again. And also personally, I would thank you to help me in chanting japa together in your Giriraj Japa Sangha during this lockdown. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Haribol.
Thank you, Guru Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Krishna Maharaj. Hare
Hare
Krishna Guru Maharaj. Thank you.
Jai. Nice to see you all.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna from Houston.
Yes.
Krishna Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Hello, Guru Maharaj. Nice to see you again.
Yes, nice to see you all the way from Australia.
Yes, Guru Maharaj. I tried to catch up, but sometimes the timing is just not enough. It just doesn't work. So.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, Manmohini Devi Dasi.
Hare Krishna Manmohini. Yeah, my god sister Sucharya from Dallas joined. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Shevali.
Oh, thank you for remembering. Thank you for the nice class, Maharaj. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol Guru Maharaj, always good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too. Very good to see you. Somebody's chanting the Maha Mantra. That is giving me a very good idea that I should do that too. And so, yeah, we'll go from here to Japa Sangha. And yeah, look forward to being with you all again soon. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare
I'm
Krishna.
ending the meeting right now. Thank you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.